On today's Locked On Jayhawks deep dive into KU basketball transfer portal target Wooga Poplar.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me as well on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere that you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition of LOJ, we're talking Wooga Poplar, another deep dive into a transfer portal target for KU. Wooga Poplar, the transfer from Miami. We'll get to his scouting report, fit with KU, and the latest going on with the Jayhawks on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning money line or spread or whatever bet that you want. Obviously, certain terms apply, so check that out. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Let's start with Wooga Poplar. Who is he? What's going on here? All that sort of stuff. Well, Wooga Poplar, first of all, great name. I mean, the first name Wuga, like where, I don't know, love it. Absolutely love it. And then Poplar just adds to it. He is a wing shooting guard type, 6'5", 200-pounder from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, who spent his last 3 seasons at the University of Miami, Florida. And this was according to Dushan London of The Athletic a little bit ago, that he said Miami transfer Wooga Poplar has heard from the following schools: St. John's, Kansas, Villanova, Kentucky, Temple, Ole Miss, Florida State, Arizona State. As we talked about before, you don't entirely know all the time. Like, it's very vague to say has heard from, right? That could be as simple as a coach checking on him. That could be a coach saying, hey, if this happens, we'd love to bring you on, or we'd just love to get you to visit or set up a Zoom call. It could be or something more serious where it's like, hey, we're offering you a scholarship right now, right? There can be differing degrees, and I don't know where Kansas is and where some of those other schools certainly are on that list. But I think an interesting player, to say the least, and for a couple of reasons in terms of the fit, and especially as you're kind of waiting what's going to happen with Johnny Furphy, or waiting what's going to happen with Riley Kugel, right? It doesn't hurt to kick the tires on another player who can kind of play wing minutes if that is the possibility. So he played his first year at Miami as a true freshman. He was on that Elite Eight team that lost to Kansas in the Elite Eight, obviously. He played single-digit minutes per game on that team, played in a lot of the games for that team, but didn't end up making like a huge impact on that team. I wonder if he actually played. I should go back and look at this. If he actually played during the Elite Eight game. I don't remember him being a part of that game in which Kansas had to come from behind. Yeah, it looks like he did get in there for 13 minutes in that game and had a resounding 0 for 2 with 4 rebounds and a foul. So I don't know, not his best work, but that wasn't his best season. Then he was awesome his sophomore year when Miami went to the Final Four. He started 36 out of 37 games for Hurricanes Final Four team, in which he scored 8.4 points per game on 37.5% from 3. So he was kind of the role-playing 4th, 5th man on the team. And then this past year ended up being a worse Miami team than the pundits were expecting. They still finished top 100 in KenPom, so they weren't like a disaster, but finished right around 500. They had some injuries they had to deal with and stuff, but he averaged 13.1 points, 4.8 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 0.8 steals, and 0.3 blocks. That was on 42.6% shooting, 38.5% from 3. So again, good 3-point shooting on 5.6 attempts per game and 86% at the foul line. So good shooter, plays wing minutes. Obviously he's been on, some winning teams, most notably that sophomore season. And honestly, like if he would have transferred after his sophomore season when they went to the Final Four and he averaged 8.5 points per game and shot nearly 38% from 3, it would have been a little bit similar to what Rylan Griffin just did. Right, where Rylan Griffin started on a Final Four team, and Griffin had even better numbers. So I'm not trying to say, this or that. Like Griffin still, I think, would be probably ranked higher on like the transfer rankings, but would be eerily similar. Good shooter on a starting Final Four team that entered the portal, right? And now you have another year of development under that with even more production. He did have a bit of a shooting slump in ACC play where he shot just 32% from 3-point range, which kind of balanced out from where he began the year starting, where he shot much better in the non-con. And also, I guess it balanced out from the year before in ACC play, because in ACC play as a sophomore, he shot 45% from three. So I don't know, just kind of a weird thing I think that happened. This was from the Athletics transfer portal rankings, which is done by CJ Moore and Sam Vecini. Good work. Check that out. Give it a subscribe, whatever. This past season was supposed to be a breakout for Poplar, who was a fifth option on the Final Four team. Poplar was someone NBA folks had their eyes on because of his athleticism, size, and ability to shoot. He did improve his scoring, but he was Miami's fourth leading scorer and didn't actually exactly live up to the preseason hype, nor did the Canes. Poplar has shown he can be a starter on a really good team and has a solid track record of making shots the last 2 years. What he does best is spot up for jumpers and attack the rim in transition or on long closeouts. And he's actually ranked 89th on Sam Vecini's top 100 big board for the 2024 NBA draft, which means that he is at least on the radar of NBA people, which means you come into your next school and you play well in whatever role you're asked to play. Your team does well, you do well, all that sort of stuff. You're a potential NBA draft pick. And if you have the opportunity to add a potential NBA draft pick to your team, there is a clear level of talent that you can have there, right? What about some of the synergy numbers of note here for Wooga Poplar? He is in the 71st percentile in spot up shooting, going 33 of 85 from 3-point range on spot ups. That's good for 39%. So, good numbers. And most of the guys we've kind of talked about here in our deep dives have had good spot up shooting numbers. I don't think that's a, coincidence, I guess. Like, I'm sure Bill Self and the staff are like, yeah, we need guys who can shoot on spot up, because what are they going to be doing? They're going to be spotting up. Dwan Harris is going to have the ball in his hand. Hunter Dickinson's going to have the ball on the block. We need guys who can spot up. So Wooga Poplar goes in line with another one of these. And we've talked about some guys who are like 89th or like 97th percentile in spot up shooting. So he's good there. Maybe not as elite as some of those other guys, but still good. 79th percentile on catch and shoot opportunities is Wooga Poplar, going 46 of 114. That's 40% from three on catch and shoot opportunities. So he was even better on catch and shoot opportunities, which again would be something that you're going to be asked to do if you do decide to come to Kansas with what they currently have on the roster. He shot 43.5% from three on unguarded catch and shoots too. And that's something I always like to look at with both the guarded and unguarded. Like, they're both important. 38% for what it's worth on guarded catch and shoot threes. So 38% on guarded catch and shoot threes, 43.5% on unguarded catch and shoot threes. The guarded ones tell me that, can you make tough shots, right? Like, sometimes you're not going to have a perfect setup. Can you still get the shot off, and can you still make them? And that's important. The unguarded ones are also important when you're looking at a player translating up to Kansas, because in theory, how many wide open corner threes did Kansas, they made some of them, but how many did they miss last season that they got open because the other team was condensing the court and, working their way in on Hunter Dickinson or double teaming, and then somebody got an open corner three and they just missed it, this past season. Like, you're going to get more open threes based on the talent you're playing with at Kansas. So are you shooting those at a high percentage too? And that was certainly the case for Wooga Poplar. He was in the 51st percentile on dribble jumpers. So basically average on dribble jumpers, something you're not going to ask to do a lot, but at least he can do at an average level. 78th percentile in transition, which makes sense. 6'5", good athlete. So able to get out in transition. And that's something that Kansas likes to do. They don't always run. They're not one of the fastest teams in the country. Usually they're a team that plays like at average, above average pace. Last year was a bit of a faster team. But when they have the transition opportunities, they like to take them, and he would be good in transition. 70th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, 78th percentile at the rim. I think that's something of note, that one, transition certainly goes into that. But I think he is somebody who, because of his athleticism, if you attack a closeout when he's spotting up or something, and you overemphasize the 3-point shot, which we know he can hit reliably, he's going to drive to the rim and he's going to finish at the rim at a high efficiency. And that's something he's shown to have a nice counter in his game. A couple things he hasn't done as well: 24th percentile on handoffs, which is not good. And that's something Kansas likes to do. Also only 5th percentile off of screens, but both of those are off of smaller sample size. Both are under 30 shots. So I guess take both of those with a grain of salt. What about the defense? What about the defense? What about the defense? Well, 61st percentile defensively this year, according to Synergy. But the year prior, he was only in the 7th percentile on Synergy. What the heck do I make of those? I don't know. The thing is, if you ask scouts about it, or I guess like coaches or based on, what kind of the intel on this kid is, he was known for being a solid defender the year before on a Miami team that made the Final Four. It's just that I think there's some similarities there with, again, Rylan Griffin, where you go back to the numbers on Rylan Griffin on the Alabama team from 2023, that was the number one overall seed. They had a really good defense, and Rylan Griffin's, efficiency, defensive numbers liked what he did that year. But then this past season on an Alabama team that was 111th on Ken Palm in defensive efficiency, they didn't like Rylan Griffin's numbers. And it's kind of the same for Wooga Poplar. Like, you look at what Miami, the year they made the Final Four in 2023, they were 99th in the country defensively on Ken Palm, And so even though he ranked poorly there, how much of that was him? How much of that was team context? Maybe you get left out to dry in certain ways. I say all the time, I think some of these defensive numbers are helpful, but they're not the be-all, end-all. We haven't figured out as good of defensive numbers as maybe offensive numbers yet, but still, I do think I would value him as being basically what I'm going with based on some of the numbers stuff combined with some of the scouting stuff and what I've kind of seen. I would view him as being a above average defender at worst, with a chance to, under Bill Self's system, being like a good defender. So I wouldn't worry about the defense, I guess. And honestly, in a lot of ways, a lot of these guys we've talked about in the deep dives, you have had to worry a little bit about the defense, or maybe it's not great defense. I don't feel that way with Wooga Poplar. All right, let's get on to how he would fit with KU on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, futures, and more. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. You can get in on golf right now. There's just so much going on. I've been having fun making some, same game parlays with some of the boosts that they offer for the NBA playoffs. They do on Tuesdays, Dinger Tuesdays, where you can bet on somebody to hit a home run. And even if they do or don't hit a home run, you get like bonus bets back for every home run that's hit in that game. So there's a lot of fun things that FanDuel is offering. Be a part of it. Visit FanDuel again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. All right, how exactly would Wooga Poplar fit in with KU? So Poplar can play the 2 or the 3. At 6'5", 200, he's got good enough size to play either, and he's a good enough athlete that he can, either use his athleticism to guard smaller guards at the 2 or to play up in terms of a jumping ability at the 3. And I think given the athleticism and the potential, he would probably, I know I made some comparisons to Rylan Griffin, and I think some of those are apt. I also think like maybe you view this is a guy that you bring in if you're not confident that the Riley Kugel situation is going to work itself out. Because keep in mind, again, Riley Kugel, even though he's committed to KU, has not signed, and it sounds like there's some, I guess, hoops that they're jumping through right now, whether it's academics or whatever, that I'm sure they'd still love to have Riley Kugel, but if it doesn't work out, you have to be prepared for something else. If you're comparing him to Riley Kugel, he's not as good of a shot creator as Riley Kugel. Even though Poplar's a good athlete, I think Kugel is even another level of the athlete. But I do think Poplar is a more reliable, better shooter than Riley Kugel. Now, Kugel, again, better at making maybe like tough shots, whereas Poplar more is making, I guess, like off the ball threes, catch and shoot, spot up, stuff like that. So it's like a different type of shooting. I think Poplar probably the better defender. Kugel, you have more creation there and more like dribbling ability. So I guess this is one that I don't know if it makes sense to, well, let me put it this way. This is a good enough player that I would take him and almost figure it out from there. We had the deep dive on Jordan Ivy Curry the other day. Like, if you're making me choose, I'm taking Wooga Poplar. But from Wooga Poplar's perspective, you're sitting there going, hey, they have Rylan Griffin and AJ Storr who are going to play on the wing. KJ Adams is going to play some 4. There's some more minutes gone. Marquise Passmore might play. I don't know. We'll see how well that translates right away, but seems like a lot of people are very high on what he's going to bring to the table right away. So that could certainly happen. You could get some minutes of smaller guards at the 2. I don't know. Maybe Kansas even plays like a 3-guard lineup of DeJuan, Elmarko, and Zeke Mayo is technically your 3 for, minutes at a time here or there. There are a lot of wings on this K roster, and that's before even getting to Riley Kugel. And so maybe if you're Wooga Poplar, you're going, yeah, I don't know. Because I think Wooga Poplar would be certainly in competition to be a starter on this team. Like, that's how highly I view him. And that's also something where I think it goes back to the idea that I think he is a good defender and has potential to be an even better defender. And when you look at what Kansas has added so far, it hasn't been more defensive focused, which I've been fine with because the offense was so bad last year, and you just trust Bill Self to figure out the defense enough to be within range of being good enough to win a title as long as you have that good offense. And so I've understood it. And knowing that you are bringing Hunter Dickinson back, like there's, I think, a bit of a ceiling of what your defense can be, knowing you might struggle guarding, the 3-point line and struggle guarding ball screens with a slow-footed big man in there. So just play up with it, try to outscore the opposition. Like, I can understand all of that, but still it wouldn't hurt to add somebody with the type of defense that Poplar could bring in. So I think he would be in competition to start, at the very least come off the bench, but because I don't know that it makes sense for both parties if Kugel is coming on, I think this one might be dependent on that type of thing happening. Like, obviously, Poplar would add shooting and athleticism and be a 3-and-D wing and all those sort of things. And I think he would be a great fit, and he can be a really good player for you. But because of the Kugel situation where you kind of are log jammed with minutes and everything, I guess I would say, I don't know, but I would still have probably Jackson Robinson ahead here, though. Honestly, you could make an argument to me that Poplar ahead of Robinson. I think Robinson, the even better offensive player, scorer, but I think Poplar, again, the defense makes this very enticing to me that maybe I would just say, hey, let's do it and figure out the rest later. So I'm kind of going back and forth and somewhere in between. But either way, I'll put it this way. Wooga Poplar is a very good player, and wherever he winds up is going to be very happy, I think, that they end up with the kid, not just because it's an awesome name, but also because he's a good player who can shoot and defend. And those are two things right there that is modern basketball, knotted up to a T. Oh, and he's a good athlete, and you're looking to always be more athletic and everything like that. So I guess right now, based on the latest deep dives we've had of guys that are like uncommitted, I'd probably go, I don't know, back and forth on Wooga Poplar, Jackson Robinson for 1 and 2. We're doing the Wooga Poplar deep dive right now. Let's have him number 1, Jackson Robinson number 2, and then Jordan Ivy Curry would be number 3 for what I'd be looking to bring on. But we're going to have another deep dive upcoming later this week, so be in the lookout for that right here with Locked On Jayhawks. All right, we're going to continue on with the show in just a moment. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there is just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's board. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults and just want to rub it in. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Finishing things up here with Locked On Jayhawks with what's kind of the latest here. And thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every episode of the show. We'll have more deep dives throughout the week. We'll have another Football Friday upcoming on Friday here. Obviously, waiting to see with some, other KU basketball visits and news, and you're waiting on Johnny Furphy to go through the NBA draft combine and everything that's going to behold. And maybe going back to the Wooga Poplar discussion here, like maybe it's not even just about Riley Kugel. Like, what is he going to do? Maybe it's a little bit about, Johnny Furphy. And right now, Kansas sitting at 11 scholarships, they can continue to be active, but what exactly are you looking for here? The one beauty, if you do bring on a guy like, say, Jordan Ivy Curry, as opposed to Poplar, is let's say Kugel does end up making it over, maybe that makes it easier to figure out the logjam of minutes versus if you brought on Wooga Poplar and then Kugel still comes, or Furphy were to come back, then it gets a little bit more difficult in trying to make everybody happy and get everybody minutes. And I know at the end of the day, you're trying to just put out the best product and, let the competition lay out. But like there is an element of wanting to keep the locker room happy. So keep an eye out for that. Kansas having an unofficial visit this week with Noah Shelby. We'll try to get into that at some point this week, who is the transfer from Rice. And I think he's a friend of Rylan Griffin, may have played with him at some point at the youth level. I don't know if it was high school or AAU or something like that. So that wouldn't hurt either. But KU certainly continues to fill out the roster and try to load up the roster as deep as possible. And there is a part of me that kind of wonders if how this all goes together from Bill Self, if there's a little bit of, hey, we don't know that every transfer is going to translate. We saw that last year, right? Hunter Dickinson did translate. He was second-team All-American. But Nick Timberlake didn't really translate. And Timberlake had a good NCAA tournament for Kansas, so deserves credit there for sure. But over the course of the season, you didn't get exactly what you were hoping for there. And so if you're Bill Self, do you view it as the more guys we bring on from the portal, the more dart throws we get? It's like having extra draft picks in the NFL draft or NBA draft, where it's like, chances are not all of these are going to work, but the more darts we throw, the more of them are going to hit the board. Better chance we have of hitting a bullseye. And maybe that's what this is, that one or two of these guys may not end up living up to the hype that you hoped for and might not end up being as big in the rotation or starting lineup as you might have thought. But if a couple of them hit, that's all we need. That's all we need when you combine the guys we have coming back and the guys we're asking to progress from year 1 to year 2. So we'll keep it with any breaking news right here with Locked On Jayhawks. Anything upcoming, you can find it right here with the show. So make sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time with LOJ.